Wherever you're joining us around the world, let's celebrate a little bit of South Florida this afternoon. Welcome along to Miami, everybody. It's the 77th venue to hold a World Championship Formula One Grand Prix, and it is the first World Championship Miami Grand Prix. Round 5 of the Formula One season in 2022. We are here in South Florida for 57 laps of racing. The celebrities have come to celebrate. Let's hope we put on a show that's fit to remember. This track, 3.36 miles around the Hard Rock Stadium, home of the Miami Dolphins. It was a car park. It's now a brilliant racetrack, and we'll see what our drivers do, coping with the 19 corners, 12 to the left and 9 to the right. 3 DRS zones, as you can see, too, and a lap distance at full throttle for 72% of those 3.36 miles. 57 laps to come, maximum speeds round about 200 miles an hour. And how will the tyres cope with the track temperatures in the very hot conditions we've had throughout the weekend? Soft as the C4, medium as the C3, hard as the C2. The hard tyre could be a favourite race tyre if it's a one-stop race, but some of the teams thinking that it might be pushed more to a two-stop race if the track temperature remains around 50 degrees. We've had a bit of rain this afternoon. That's cooled things down, but it won't last for long. Here's the starting grid then for the first ever Miami Grand Prix. Esteban Ocon couldn't take part in qualifying. He had a damaged chassis. He lines up at the back with Nicholas Latifi for Williams, whose teammate Alex Albon a place ahead alongside Guan Yu Zhou for Alfa Romeo. Next comes the two Haas drivers. Mick Schumacher out qualifying Kevin Magnussen, the 15th and 16th on the grid. Sebastian Vettel will start in the pit lane. Daniel Ricciardo on his own. On the day, he equals Mark Webber as the most experienced Australian driver. Fernando Alonso 11th ahead of George Russell for Mercedes, and we move into the top 10 where Yuki Tsunoda's on his own because Lance Stroll, like his teammate, will also start in the pit lane this afternoon. Pierre Gasly, a season best 7th on the grid, lines up alongside Lando Norris for McLaren. And then we get into the top 6. 2 former teammates, Lewis Hamilton alongside Valtteri Bottas, best ever qualifying for Alfa Romeo since 2019. Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen making an all Red Bull second row. The front row has been locked out by Carlos Sainz and the championship leader, Charles Leclerc. Ferrari on form during qualifying. What can they bring us for this race this afternoon? Both cars for the Scuderia on the front row for the first time since Mexico 2019. Martin Brundle alongside me in the commentary box. Congratulations, you are trending on social media after that grid walk. Not the shirt, that was never trendy, but well done, mate. You made your way through it.
Grid work, it's more like it than a grid walk. But well, 2 Ferraris are on medium compound tyres. Nobody's starting on the soft compound red mark tyres. So we have some cars, well, Stroll if he's going to start in the pit lane, Vettel in the pit lane as well, George Russell on the grid, and then Latifi and Ocon at the back on the hard tyres. Everybody else on the medium, really very much as expected, I must say. They're concerned about the durability. I'm sure they might think of using the soft tyres later on in the race if there's a safety car and a bit of a sprint to the end when you've burned off a lot of your race fuel. But it's only 200 metres down to the first braking point. So they'll be quite compact as a grid when they get down there, and it's you can just about squeeze 2 through the first part of it, but not through the second part.
And I'm rather thinking the 2 Ferrari drivers are going to have to work as a team at the start, because we have seen drivers on the odd-numbered side of the grid, the clean side, the racing line, get better starts. So what can Sainz do to ward off the threat of Max Verstappen, and how can Leclerc help him?
Yeah, that's really hard to choreograph, though. You know, you've got to get your car underway, minimise the wheel spin, spot the gear shifts perfectly, pull the revs without touching the rev limiter, and you're so busy sorting your own car out. But they really do need, probably to get a bit of a pincer movement in the middle, but the track's quite wide. You can see there's some extra blue space on the side as well. So they might be 2 meters wide, but the cars look quite narrow there, don't they? So I think they're better just concentrating on getting their car up and running, and then almost immediately thinking about slowing it down again.
So we set off then on the formation lap. 18 cars setting off on the formation lap. There's the predicted pit stop strategy. So we're expecting on a 2-stop for drivers to come in round about lap 12 to 19. It is a voyage into the unknown for the teams. A lot of red flags so far this weekend. They don't know really how the tyres are going to hold up and whether track position will be king or whether overtaking will be possible, and you can gamble on an early stop.
Yeah, and I was looking at some Pirelli data down there. It said the track was 47 degrees. It's showing somewhat less than that on the official computer, but that was as measured from the track surface on the grid. It's 63% humidity, perhaps. I mean, obviously that's not Singapore or the Malaysian Grand Prix, but this is a physical track, and one little run wide. They've been scrubbing and sweeping again this racetrack because there's been a lot of little stones coming up. So it does look pretty immaculate, I must say. Well done. It's a great racetrack, but one slip of your concentration and you'll be in the wall.
So you've seen the championship order. Ferrari leading the Constructors' Championship. Charles Leclerc leading the Drivers' Championship. Previous wins in the United States for Lewis Hamilton, for Kimi Räikkönen, Valtteri Bottas and Max Verstappen, who won last time out when we went to Austin. This is the first of 2 races in the US in 2022. And here at the Dolphins, we'll probably talk about porpoising quite a bit down these straights. Can they limit the teams, the bouncing that's going on in the car? Can they make moves into this final hairpin, limit the bouncing and try and get some overtakes done?
Yes, obviously the DRS, drag reduction system, doesn't come in for a couple of laps. So with heavier fuel, no DRS, which is worth about 18 kilometers per hour. What's that? 12, 13 miles per hour. You'll be going more slowly. You're less likely to get into the porpoising zone until later in the straight, if you do at all. But George Russell and Mercedes, I mean, they're so confused about what their car is at the moment. It seems such a knife edge. 1 minute he looked on Friday like he might be challenging for pole. Next minute, he can't get through Q2.
And as I mentioned, 18 cars lining up on the grid. The 2 Aston Martins of Lance Stroll and Sebastian Vettel starting from the pit lane. They saw that the temperature of their fuel was just a little bit too cold. You can only be a certain temperature outside of the ambient temperature in the air. And if you are too cool, you risk a penalty. So they remove the fuel, they put it back in again, and that's why they're starting from the pit lane, because it was something they had to do outside the time limit to get their cars to the grid.
Yeah, the only good thing about starting from the pit lane is you'll miss any first corner melees, but it's still not a good thing.
And there you go, the 2 Williams slotting into their final positions at the back of the grid, and Esteban Ocon alongside Nicholas Latifi in 20th place. It's the first ever Miami Grand Prix. We're racing in the States and it's lights out, away we go. And it's a great reaction from Charles Leclerc. It's a decent reaction from Max Verstappen, but Carlos Sainz is ahead of him. Leclerc into the first turn. It's wheel to wheel, Verstappen and Sainz. Sainz has just lost out to Verstappen, who makes up into 2nd place. Perez in 4th place, and then comes Valtteri Bottas, and then comes Pierre Gasly. Lewis Hamilton under pressure from Fernando Alonso in the Alpine. Great start for Max Verstappen. He's made up a place. Ferrari 1-2 is now a 1-3 with a Red Bull sandwiched in between.
Yeah, the initial launch from Carlos Sainz wasn't quite as good, and he just couldn't get the momentum back. And Verstappen very brave around the outside. Lewis
Hamilton losing then a couple of places right at the start. It's Charles Leclerc who's won all 4 career wins from pole position, who leads them away. Then Verstappen, then Sainz, then Perez, Bottas, Gasly and Fernando Alonso. Behind Fernando Alonso comes Lewis Hamilton, then Lando Norris in the McLaren. Behind Norris is Yuki Tsunoda. Daniel Ricciardo looks to have made up a place or 2 from the start. As round the beach club they go. Every fan's got a camera phone in their hand, all wanting a picture of this. And right at the back looked like to me a couple of 2 Hasses going wheel to wheel around that turn 12.
Now the problem Ferrari have got is the Red Bull, even without DRS, is 10 kilometers, 5-6 miles an hour faster down the straight, plus a slipstream. So a Red Bull will be delighted that Max Verstappen's up into P2.
We said it, didn't we? That clean side of the grid is giving drivers an opportunity for overtakes, and that's exactly what Max Verstappen did. There is George Russell right behind Zhou Guanyu down in 15th place. He's lost places at the start. Zhou has made up his Alfa Romeo into 14th. But it's Leclerc, Verstappen and Sainz, the 1, 2, 3, as we look further back to see Daniel Ricciardo and Mick Schumacher having a good dice. And there's George Russell just ahead of his old mate Alex Albon.
Yeah, George down in 15th at the moment, so Mercedes struggling on the opening lap, of course, on the hard compound tyres, and I think they'll take a little bit of getting up to speed for George Russell.
8/10 of a second, the lead that Charles Leclerc had over Max Verstappen at the end of the first lap, and is accelerating away on this lap as he tries to get more than a second ahead of Verstappen by the time that the DRS is enabled. If you're within a second, you can use DRS. And there, Verstappen up 1 place, Gasly up 1 place, Alonso up 4 places, 3 places for Ricciardo, Schumacher, Magnussen and Joe, 2 places for Albon, Latifi 1 place, and Ocon 3 places right from the back.
Yeah, and Lewis Hamilton's been on the radio complaining that Alonso hit him during that first lap, but otherwise they were extremely well behaved. It's something I said in the pre-show. This is a race to survive. I'm pretty sure all the team said to them, look, it might rain, there might well be a safety car, might even be a red flag. Get to the end of this Grand Prix. There's a result to be had for pretty much everybody relative to their performance.
To finish first you have to finish, and that might be the phrase, as you say, Martin, of the day. First time this season, Lewis Hamilton has lost places at the start of the race. How close did Fernando Alonso come to making contact with him? We'll see a replay in a few moments as into the hairpin we go, and George Russell still under pressure there from Alex Albon right behind him in the Williams. Russell running the hard tyre in the early stages here. Albon on the medium tyre, which should be that little bit grippier off the start and faster too. And it's over a second the lead that Charles Leclerc has then over Max Verstappen, and Carlos Sainz quickly getting dropped by our leading pair.
And this is great information for the rest of the field. George Russell really struggling to fire the hard compound. He's the front runner using the hard compound. There's only one behind him, Alex Albon. Not quite sure how much longer he's going to be behind him either. So otherwise, all the hard runners have fallen to the back. Of course, the 2 Astons started at the back anyway.
On board with Lewis Hamilton, chasing Fernando Alonso, who has shown great defence. Remember last year in Hungary to Lewis Hamilton, but has he got the defence this time around? Doesn't look like he has. Lewis Hamilton making his way up into 7th place, and the way that the Mercedes breezed past the Alpine on that particular occasion will be of great encouragement to all those back at the base and cheering Mercedes on here in the grandstands.
Well, looks as if we're going to get some DRS overtaking at least, doesn't it? Hopefully we'll get some organic overtaking as well.
Well, that certainly was rather organic from Lewis Hamilton. There's our race leader, Charles Leclerc. No DRS for Max Verstappen behind him as they bounce their way down the straight underneath the trees. There's a bit of breeze in the air, but a lot of that branch movement is coming from the Formula One cars that are shooting the air up into the sky. Daniel Ricciardo under pressure once again from Zhou Guanyu. I mentioned that it's his 215th race, equal with Mark Webber as the most experienced Aussie driver, and this is how the race started. Great reaction from Charles Leclerc and from Max Verstappen.
Yeah, and Max just braver on the brakes, wasn't it? It's quite an acute angle that Carlos Sainz has got up the inside there, and Max used his momentum very well indeed to seize that second place, and then the 2 main championship contenders at the moment then out in 1st and 2nd place. Daniel Ricciardo sort of making his way up a little bit. Oh, there were so few revs on. Just got away with that start, and then Max putting a lot of trust in his old teammate Carlos Sainz, and rightly so. It worked a treat, and there was no contact.
I think that was what that man came to see. This is Lewis Hamilton. Now, watch as he makes his way towards turn 1, and there's a little lock-up coming here, which was the first bit of bad news for Lewis Hamilton, and then I think he gets a bit of a tap here from the left-hand side. There.
I've been hit from behind. So I don't think we've suffered any damage.
And that was this man, Martin, Fernando Alonso. We'll see it better, I think, from his angle.
Yeah, so Lewis has had a bit of a moment up the inside, gets pinched up against the apex, and then
wheel to wheel, wasn't it?
Yeah, very much it was. Yeah, wheel face to wheel face, so that tends to not be an issue, but it certainly put Lewis, had to get out of the throttle and correct the car with some opposite lock. Yeah, Carlos there, he's kind of damned if he does, damned if he doesn't, isn't he? Can't brake any later. There was a risk he would go into the side of his teammate. And I think Max had rehearsed that in his mind plenty of times.
Charles Leclerc has just set his fastest lap of the race. Trouble for him. Max Verstappen set the fastest lap of the race, and he's still within touching distance if DRS comes into play along this lap. Lap 5 of 57. Let's head down to Ted Kravitz. Good afternoon, Ted.
Hi, Crofty. Hi, Martin. Yeah, Carlos Sainz needs to start setting some fastest laps because Sergio Perez closing right up on him as they come by the pit lane. It's Valtteri Bottas who's actually creating a gap now. Perez has got a big gap behind him. Bottas starting to hold up Pierre Gasly and potentially the cars behind him, but Bottas holding strong in 5th place. A word also on Esteban Ocon. Remember, this is a brand new car, Crofty. Had not turned a wheel, had it? It's a brand new chassis after he cracked it, didn't take part in qualifying, so he's doing really well.
2 secs, Tab.
I definitely feel like I got some damage in the left rear.
Okay, copy. We're looking into it. Nothing on data at the moment.
But another lock-up there from Lewis Hamilton going into the chicane. Let's head down to the pit wall. Christian Horner with us from the Red Bull team. Magnificent start from Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez closing it on Carlos Sainz. Race going well so far, Christian.
Yeah, it's all settling down, and of course it's very different setups between the Ferrari and our car. So you can see Charles is a lot quicker in sector 1. 2 and 3 we come back at them, so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
What sort of information have you got on the weather, Christian? And should we get it? It says 40% officially of rain.
Yeah, there's some weather around, so it's just something we've got to be on top of and alert to. So, yeah, you just got a feeling that anything can happen in this race.
And the hard compound tyre, as Lewis Hamilton passes Pierre Gasly, the hard compound tyre is not doing much for those at the back.
No, it looks a difficult tyre to get going, so I'm quite pleased we got a couple of sets of mediums and 1 hard compared to the Ferraris with 2 hards and 1 medium, so that could be crucial later in the race.
Especially if it goes to a 2-stop race. Christian, thank you very much. Track temperature has gone up 7 degrees officially since the start of the race. I rather get the feeling the sensor that we use and is used for everybody might have been in the shade right at the start of this race, because to go up 7 degrees in just a few laps seems rather extreme. Hamilton, as you mentioned, Martin, up into 6th place. If he has got damage, it's not being shown in his moves out on the track at the moment. And at Sky Race Control, I think Karun Chandok wants to come in and say hello. Hello, Karun.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I've been listening into the radio, the top 4, Crofty, and it's fascinating. The Ferrari pit wall are really coaching their drivers. Let's take a look at this battle. Take it away.
Mick Schumacher and Yuki Tsunoda having quite a decent scrap, and it's going to carry on down the main straight. Packed grandstands to the left-hand side, but the 2 drivers focused very much on the tarmac. And can Mick Schumacher get through? He can, but there was a bit of brushing wheel to wheel as well.
Yeah, just listening, the engineers are really coaching both Leclerc and Sainz about even how late to turn into some corners, like turn 11 with Charles. So there's a lot more information coming from the pit wall, and it's all to do with managing their tyres. They're still concerned with these high track temperatures.
Mick Schumacher up into 10th place then. Never scored points in Formula 1 before, but can he get points here today and hang on to that 10th spot?
Cracking move.
Yeah.
A bit reminiscent of his dad, that one. And, yeah, as you say, up into the points. He's been going very well around here, has young Mick Schumacher, but it'd be nice to see him get a few points this afternoon, wouldn't it? But what else is going on a bit further down? Daniel Ricciardo's kind of stuck there behind Yuki Tsunoda at the moment, but in DRS range. As they just settle down a little bit. But
so we have to stop now. Vettel, I can't believe it.
Something's happened to Guan Yu Zhou that is forcing him into the pits and possibly retiring from this race. He's just been passed by Sebastian Vettel when that radio message came up, and he is rather disappointed. This his first race, of course, in the US. First time that he'd got knocked out in Q1 yesterday, and he becomes the first retiree from this race on lap 7. Guan Yu Zhou into the pits, into the garage, and whilst he might be smiling in that picture, he won't be smiling under the crash helmet.
no, he had a great start to his Formula 1 career, didn't he, back in Bahrain, but he's not had an awful lot of luck since.
Yes, 66th driver to score points on their Formula 1 debut. Just stopping into that hairpin there just seems so tentative, so on the edge, and can you find the right line out of it?
Can start to see some damage perhaps to Leclerc's front right tyre.
And he's also within the DRS range now, inside the 1 second. So I was talking about this being an anti-clockwise circuit, therefore it is the right front that you're more likely to hurt. Obviously you're going to end up doing more left-handers than right-handers to go around an anti-clockwise track, and that will be music to Max Verstappen's ears. But now Leclerc, being so good in that first sector, has pulled that out again. Well, look at that. It's sort of varying, isn't it? 9/10 to a second.
Big cheers from the grandstands every time the cars pass them, and the lucky crowd down at turn 13 could very much see that Max Verstappen is gaining here on Charles Leclerc. And as they drift their way through that chicane and onto the back straight, will this be the first chance we get to see Max Verstappen open the DRS and have a real go at Charles Leclerc? Is he close enough? It's a very, very long straight down here, and he's got about 7 miles an hour of extra speed without the DRS on the Ferrari, and gets close, but not quite close enough going into turn 17. 10, down to you.
There's a great fight for P14 and 15 with this year's Williams driver Alex Albon and the guy who got him this year's Williams drive, George Russell.
Ted, they're going for it. Max Verstappen on the inside has got Charles Leclerc and has taken the lead. DRS helping out the Red Bull, extra pace helping out the Red Bull. The leaders swap round on lap 9 here. Verstappen ahead of Leclerc.
A lot of people thought that extra little bit of DRS on the pit straight wouldn't really do any good, but it certainly enabled Max Verstappen to take lead. He got close into turn 17, slipstreamed into the pit straight, and then didn't exactly breeze past. He had to get the job done, but that was very powerful indeed as he now comes through the final turn. And Leclerc just didn't know which way to go to defend. I don't think he'd got any defence of the just sheer straight line speed of that Red Bull.
Rather get the feeling Max Verstappen approached the track today wanting to get the job done. Was pretty miffed in qualifying that he missed out. He made a mistake in his final lap, couldn't go and take pole. He was miffed that he didn't get much track time because of technical issues on Friday. Wanted to make amends in the race and is doing that at the moment. But Charles Leclerc has stuck with him very nicely through the first couple of sectors on this lap, and now will get the DRS himself down that back straight to see if the Ferrari can get past. But the trouble is, Martin, he hasn't got the speed advantage that the Red Bull's got.
Absolutely not, even with the slipstream and the DRS. Look, he's not getting that much closer to him. He'll get another run down the pit straight now. But that was telling indeed, wasn't it? That the Ferrari just couldn't come out. And this has been the story of the year, and I think unless Ferrari do something about this VMAX, as we call it, this top speed, then you know, they're going to really struggle in this championship to beat Red Bull, and particularly Verstappen.
Which might just make their inability to take a commanding position out of the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix last time out even more critical by the end of the year. Verstappen then starting to edge away slightly from Charles Leclerc. Max Verstappen, who overtook Leclerc to win the Saudi Grand Prix with 3 laps to go. Well, he's not going to win necessarily this race, but he's put himself in a very good position. And for the first time in 3 races, we won't get the Grand Slam today. The pole, the win, the fastest lap, and led every lap, as Verstappen and Leclerc have done in the previous 2 races.
Yeah, you can see when we're on board with Leclerc there just how much grip he'd got, even in the turbulent air behind the Red Bull. So he's carrying a bit more downforce. It's helping him through certain sectors, but not where it matters most, of course. In the straight lines, when it's an easy overtake, you'll not be overtaking anybody through this little section unless they make a mistake.
Elsewhere, just looking a little bit further down the field, George Russell's hard tyres might just have sparked into life a little bit, starting to give him a bit more of the grip that he's looking for. He's not only catching Yuki Tsunoda, but his lap times have very much improved in the past couple of laps too. His teammate Lewis Hamilton running 6th behind Valtteri Bottas. Sergio Perez still within touching distance of Carlos Sainz. Charles Leclerc still hanging on to the back of Max Verstappen and is just going to have to wait maybe for a mistake from the reigning world champion or tyres to start dropping off to give him a bit more parity to try and overtake. But what we're going to see here from Daniel Ricciardo, who's running down in about 13th place at the moment. Well, make that 12th. Yuki Tsunoda, the car on the outside, that Ricciardo decides, well, I'll outbrake you, not a problem.
That's the old Daniel Ricciardo we know and loved and love. What did he say? Lick the stamp and send it, or whatever his expression is? Well, that was one of those.
Maybe trying to get some inspiration from Sir Jack Brabham this afternoon here in Florida. Jack winning his first world title in Sebring, didn't he, in 1959. I think he had to push the car over the line at the end. I'm not quite sure Daniel will be able to do that today and get away with it, but he's getting ever closer to the points, and Kevin Magnussen is next.
We are extending this stint as much as we can.
And he's starting to come back a little bit. His teammate is Carlos Sainz, 3/10 quicker on the previous lap. I think quicker on the lap before that too. 5 seconds covers the top 4. Sergio Perez still very, very much in this. It's a 4-horse race out front. Valtteri Bottas still doing a sterling job for Alfa Romeo, up there ahead of his old teammate at Mercedes-Benz. What do they call that in German? Schadenfreude or something?
Something like that.
He must have a little smile on his face when he sees the Mercedes in his mirrors.
I think he has a smile on his face pretty much all the time, Valtteri Bottas, at the moment. Yeah, he would have loved to have stayed at Mercedes, but he has a bit more security with a long-term contract at Alfa Romeo and is enjoying being the team leader of the Hinwil outfit. And there he is, ahead of his teammate Lewis Hamilton by about 3 seconds at the moment. They're all quite spaced out down that back straight, apart from the two Hasses here. Kevin Magnussen has got ahead of Mick Schumacher and moved up into 10th place. And there's Daniel Ricciardo with Yuki Tsunoda right behind him. And we are on board with George Russell, thinking that Yuki Tsunoda could be fair game down the next straight. In fact, Tsunoda pits.
Look at that front wing look of the Mercedes falling away. Amazing how much flex that's got in it.
It's been doing that all season.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, I mean, it's a bit like when you take off in a jumbo jet, the wings flap about a bit, don't they? They can't be infinitely stiff, but otherwise they break. But that's what you want. You want the wing to unwind a little bit as you go, you know, to give you a bit more confidence in the back of the car.
So Ricciardo now with George Russell right behind him after Yuki Tsunoda pitted, and he drops to the rear of the field. Only Guan Yu Zhou has retired from this race so far with mechanical DNF. And they just thread a line at full blast, Martin, in between the concrete barriers. As you said on your track guide with Sebastian Vettel as you were driving around, it is very, very quick down there.
It is. You put a lot of trust in your team to let you know there's a slower car, and particularly the marshals who are doing a fine job here. Oh, that's very, very wide then in turn 17 for Charles Leclerc. This will be a scruffy lap, and the lead then is going to be over 2 seconds, I'd imagine. 2.6. Oh, it's a horrible lap. 1.1 slower. And here we go. That's the right front that locked up there, and it's cost him a second. Karun, what can you tell us?
Yeah, the Ferraris are struggling, just like in Imola, guys. Remember, the Red Bull were patient, and they got that win on the sprint. Same thing. They've been telling Checo Perez, bide your time. It's coming to you. And that gap, Perez now nearly there within DRS of Carlos Sainz. Sainz, meanwhile, has started to catch Leclerc as well. Even before that mistake, guys, he'd pulled in about a second on the second place man.
I also think this is a sort of a day for Sergio Perez. Lots of slow corners, traction important out of it. He's very good at preserving those rear tyres and making the most of it. Kevin Magnussen, after getting past his teammate, pits for a set of hard compound tyres, and the teams will be watching to see how quickly they get fired up. Took George Russell's Mercedes quite a while, but Russell now running in the 135s.
Yeah, tyres still all right. Yeah, done an excellent job on the front right. Keep looking after it.
And lapping about 0.3 of a second quicker on the last lap than Ricciardo or Schumacher.
Yeah, it's because the Mercedes actually is running quite nicely pace-wise. Hamilton's catching Bottas at a chunk at the moment, and Russell is very much hanging on to Daniel Ricciardo. He's within the DRS range.
And behind that, Pierre Gasly and Fernando Alonso. Ted's got news on that battle.
Yeah, that's Alonso with some pace in the Alpine. Feels he could get quicker and get past Pierre Gasly, but it's just not quick enough at the moment. But don't expect that that won't put him off having a go anytime soon. Fernando's been within DRS range of Gasly for quite a few laps now. I'll tell you what happened to Yuki Tsunoda. His tyres just went off very quickly. Complained on the radio that he had next to no grip. So they've decided to pit him onto the hard tyre and see what they can rescue from this race.
So Yuki Tsunoda has pitted, and Kevin Magnussen has also pitted, and Guan Yu Zhou is out of the race, and we're watching from the rear of the other AlphaTauri of Pierre Gasly, who incredibly 7th on the grid for this race, his best qualifying of 2022. We're kind of used to Gasly being in the top 6, but I think the AlphaTauri is a bit of a different beast in 2022.
And working better, I think, in these warmer temperatures, probably firing his tyres up. And I think that's what's hurting McLaren. They were so good in Imola. I think they were good at firing the tyres up. Is that an overtake?
Yes.
Or is Ricciardo pitting?
No, Ricciardo's not pitting. That was a genuine overtake.
Pure overtake there. So both Mercedes then beginning to be on a march. They're looking after their tyres nicely, so they can't fire them up. but it starts to pay dividends a little bit further into the run.
And do you remember how George Russell in Saudi got the benefit of a safety car and managed to be on track at the right time, having not made his pit stop yet? Well, on the hard compound tyre, any safety car might help George Russell out here a bit, because he can go that much longer on the first stint on those hard tyres and those sporting the mediums at the moment.
So we are planning to go to plan D for Delta, and hard as expected. So
that's hard tyres are not that good, I'm going to guess. Leclerc's just done his personal best, almost matching within 1/1000th of a second Verstappen's new fastest lap of the race. So he's gone through the phase on his right front tyre for Charles Leclerc. I think that's what Ferrari are referring to there. Sainz is hanging on nicely as well, dropping Perez just slightly, but Sergio's still very much in the hunt. But right, we're going longer, and there's the porpoising. I don't know how they spot a braking point there. The human brain and the human eye is an extraordinary thing, as we all know well, but how do they spot a braking point? And then, of course, it calms down a little bit. I wonder if they can't put a little, I think they're getting some tricks, a little bit of lateral movement, bit of steering left and right to try to calm the bouncing down.
It is very, very extreme for Charles Leclerc, the man who started this race as our race leader. Was passed, though, by Max Verstappen on lap 9. If you missed it and you're a Sky Q and a Sky Glass customer, well, you can press your red button and watch the highlights of the race alongside the live action, so you don't have to miss a thing on this Sunday race. David Beckham, one of many, many celebrities here in Miami, and why not, the president of Inter Miami football team, of course. So they've all come to see a fine race, and at the moment it's an absorbing race, but tyre strategy, tyre wear and fatigue, because it is brutally hot out there, could cause this to explode at any given moment. Verstappen leads from Leclerc, 3.5 seconds the difference. Carlos Sainz running third for Ferrari, and behind him Sergio Perez. Long gap then back to Valtteri Bottas, who's having another lonely afternoon, but he won't care if he can get fifth place. Valtteri Bottas, which is of course where he finished the last race, the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Hamilton runs sixth ahead of Pierre Gasly, Lando Norris, and it was Fernando Alonso who's come into pit. That has taken rather a while because the right rear tyre just wouldn't go on, Martin.
What a shame. He's gone for an undercut on Pierre Gasly, and that long pit stop of 5.7 seconds is normally around 2.5 at the moment, has really scuppered that. At least he gets out in front of this gaggle.
Yeah, but only just. Vettel ahead of Albon, ahead of Lance Stroll, who was looking to make a move around the first corner. Sebastian Vettel's making an attempt to try and get past Fernando Alonso here. Oh, how many Grand Prix worth of experiences this particular battle? 338th race for Fernando Alonso, 282nd race for Sebastian Vettel.
6 world championships between them, and you can't help but feel with Fernando Alonso it could have and should have been another couple in his pocket as well.
Here comes Lance Stroll on Nicholas Latifi. The two Canadians are going wheel to wheel, toe to toe. When they last got together, it ended up in disaster for both in qualifying in Australia. Stroll's going to try and go the long way round the outside at turn 11. He's squeezed out though by Nicholas Latifi, goes off the track slightly, but he's got the inside line. Not seen anyone pass on the inside down there. That was really neat by Lance Stroll, by Sebastian Vettel, I should say, who makes his way out of that particular battle and ahead of Nicholas Latifi. But now Kevin Magnussen hanging back and waiting to pounce on the Canadian down the straight.
Rubbing is racing, as they say in these parts, and hanging out there, getting his elbows out nicely.
And there goes Kevin Magnussen down that back straight. And the Williams is easy prey with the fresh tyres on the Haas as Pierre Gasly makes his pit stop round about 2.4 seconds quicker than Fernando Alonso. So he'll come out onto the track now, and you can see them filing through and down the main straight. There is Alonso with the Aston Martin of Lance Stroll right behind him. Then comes the Haas and Nicholas Latifi in the Williams. So let's have a little look here at what happened to Fernando Alonso as he came into the pits. Watch that right rear.
They'll be so frustrated with that, how often they practice that back at the factory in the pit lane. Of course, Alpine have had a bit of a torrid weekend, haven't they? Rebuilding Esteban Ocon's car, but they'll be so frustrated with that stop.
Charles Leclerc will be so frustrated with that mistake a few laps ago as well, because he's just dropping further and further back. 3.5 seconds the gap between Verstappen and Leclerc. What can Ferrari do now, Martin, to try and put their man back into play again?
Well, Perez is back into play in terms of DRS behind Carlos Sainz, so the Red Bull much kinder on its tyres. You could see the Ferrari moving around through turn 4 and 5 there, but really, I don't know what they could do. Leclerc's got to come and put some pressure on Verstappen somehow, but 3.5 seconds adrift. And of course, you know, Verstappen can build that a little bit further. That means he can wait a lap to react. He can wait a lap and won't get undercut. So that's what Red Bull will be hoping to do at the moment. Build a bigger gap out front and a cushion and a good decision point. A safety car would spice this up quite nicely right now, wouldn't it?
Certainly would. Look at Sergio Perez, though. Look how closer, or how much closer he's got to Carlos Sainz. We'll keep an eye on that as we head down to Ted.
Yeah, surely Ferrari's only hope now is a safety car, but that's not impossible, although it's been quiet so far, hasn't it? Always happens, Crofty, doesn't it? Whenever one of us says anything can happen, and probably will, then we get no safety car. But hey, now I've said that will probably happen. Let me tell you about George Russell, whose hard tyres are really coming alive, and that's a notice for everybody in the pit lane. Yes, it's taken 18 or 19 laps, but he's now lapping as quick, or no, if not quicker, than Lewis Hamilton on the old medium. And starting to close up to the Norris battle. So we got a Brit 1, 2, 3, haven't we? Hamilton, Norris, Russell, with an Aussie in there as well. That almost counts. So yeah, interesting fight for 6th, 7th and 8th. Separated by a few seconds or so, but interesting fight.
I love your optimism there, Ted. We've got a Brit 1, 2, 3 in 6, 7, 8. But, you know, there's still time.
3 of them, yeah.
I could hear many of our Aussie fans we talked to hissing there on that one, Tedos.
On boards with the Red Bull. Such speeds, mid 170 miles an hour before you approach, and you were standing by the side of the track here, Martin, turn 5 and 6, as in comes Lando Norris in the McLaren. He was running down in 7th place, and McLaren have decided now is the time they need to get him in, because those mediums were starting to go off. They'll need the hard compound tyres to go on. Didn't look to be the most straightforward pit stop, and McLaren, who have done very, very well with their pit stops this year, a lot of them under 3 seconds, 3.6 on that occasion.
Yeah, it's, the wheels are so heavy this year, and they're 23 kilograms of rear wheel weight.
This could be tight. This could be tight. The Aston Martin of Lance Stroll just squeezes in ahead of Lando Norris, who's quickly getting swallowed up here by Sebastian Vettel. And on the inside goes the Haas of Kevin Magnussen. There was almost 3 abreast going into that one before Vettel comes out ahead of Norris, and Magnussen is still waiting to try and pounce, and that extra second in the pit stop has really cost Lando Norris here, because he's come straight out into a battle that so far he's lost out on.
Yeah, and he was just trying to build them back up to temperature, sat in the pit lane a while, you then trundle out of the pits, you lose a lot of temperature and pressure there, and Lando then really struggling to find confidence, and Magnussen and the Aston Martin had enough momentum to clear him.
You mentioned the wheels being heavier this year, Martin.
I'm losing power, man.
We're looking.
I'm losing a lot of power.
Yeah,
And
we're looking into it.
And his lap time.
Oh, what's going on?
It's all looking good. Power unit's all looking good. We see the power loss.
I'm losing power, man. I'm losing power. How can you say it's good?
You've lost the toe. You've dropped back and lost the toe.
Man, I'm losing power. Look at my straight line. I'm losing 3 seconds per straight. The engine is gone, man. I'm losing 4 seconds per straight.
Yeah, they need to look at Sergio Perez's lap times, because he's about 4 seconds slower on the last lap, and he is quickly being swallowed up now by Valtteri Bottas, who's getting ever quicker. We're on board with Lando Norris.
Somebody's been around somewhere, haven't they?
Yeah.
Somebody's had a little spin or run off the track. We had double waved yellows out there.
Sergio Perez being told, look, it's okay, nothing wrong with the power unit. He knows he's losing power. It's at least 2 seconds on this lap in the first sector alone. Lando Norris spun on those hard tyres. He's just come out on.
He's gone deep.
He's gone very deep. And that's how he got passed by the Haas of Kevin Magnussen.
So we still don't know why the yellows are out, do we?
Well, we know that Max Verstappen's just set the new fastest lap. 3.5 seconds clear now, Charles Leclerc. Carlos Sainz running in 3rd place, and they might have got Sergio Perez back to full pace again.
Yeah, they have. Apparently, they fixed his motor.
Keep going. We're doing all we can. We're looking at it. Fail 5-0. Fail 5-0. Fail.
So it's obviously left there.
Power units looking good from our side now. All good for you?
Yeah, I think it's back.
Yeah, his sector times are representative again now, so it's a sensor that they've had to take out of the system, I'd imagine, and then he's back in the game. But that's cost him. He was within a second of Carlos Sainz. He's now 6.9 behind.
Yeah, and Valtteri Bottas, roughly the same amount behind him. More reliability woes and troubles for Red Bull. What of Kevin Magnussen? I think he's rather enjoying himself out there. That's Sebastian Vettel on the left-hand side. Magnussen's gone off the track there, but that is not a way to try and cut past. It's not like the final corners at Austin, for instance, where you can easily go off the track and then come back on. Ask Max Verstappen after his battle with Kimi Raikkonen a few years ago. You run out of space doing that, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, he was making his own track up there, wasn't he? But he didn't make the pass. The problem out there is there's a good chance of picking up punctures if you're not careful. With all the sort of detritus that ends up parked out there. And look in the foreground here, the amount of marbles coming off the tyres. Anybody running wide through there will, a little bit later in the race, will find themselves sliding very wide.
Just going to mention, before we heard from Sergio Perez, talk about the wheels being bigger and heavier this year. These temperatures, very, very hot today. And we've seen him in previous races when it gets hot, pit stops can often take a little bit longer. We've had Fernando Alonso with a slow pit stop, and so far in this race. And I just wonder, sticky wheel nuts, do they come into play?
You're right to point that out, and it's been a phenomenon for a long time. The hub and the spindle and the nut and the wheel do get extremely hot, and you can practice all you like, but that's a different scenario when you've got that amount of temperature there.
Yep, so Alonso struggling from his pit stop, Lando Norris struggling and down in 16th place at the moment. Meanwhile, George Russell has just started to pick up his pace that little bit more. Was 0.6 of a second quicker than Lewis Hamilton on the previous lap, and then the next lap, 1/10 of a second faster than Hamilton. He's starting to come back into the picture a little bit as we look once more at Kevin Magnussen. Stopped quite the way he wanted to on that occasion.
Oops, yeah, he had to correct a slide from the back on the way into the apex, which was unusual. So he has pitted as well, hasn't he, Magnussen? But back end of the car stepping out on turn in to the hairpin. It wasn't the traditional lock up there, and it's so frustrating when you've gone in deep. If you brake too hard, you just lock a wheel. You're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you've just arrived too hot into the braking zone.
Now, Lewis Hamilton has been told to pit and to box. His tyres had reached the end of their useful life. Ted Kravitz, I think you can see Hamilton now.
He's right in front of me, so yeah, let's see if Mercedes, bit of a lock-up then going in, that's fine, doesn't need those tyres anymore. Very nice, lovely work, Mercedes. While other people have suffered today with these hot tyres and hot wheel nuts, and there's a pat on the back for both of them. Expect to see maybe as the people around him, maybe Bottas pitting in a bit, even though Bottas had a very healthy lead over Hamilton.
We've had years, haven't we, of Bono saying to Lewis, hammer time, Lewis, this is it. This will win the race and all that. I hope they get this Mercedes sorted out soon.
But worth a pat on the back to the pit crew there, because Hamilton's come out ahead of Ricciardo, and that was important. Still might have a bit of pressure on him on this particular lap while those hard tyres get warmed up. George Russell, though, moves up into 6th place when Bottas and maybe Perez respond. I wonder where George Russell might find himself running in this race. Could help Mercedes by having one of their runners on the hard tyre and getting track position by the middle part of this race, and Russell's right in the game for that.
Yeah, and he's just done a personal best first sector, George. So, if he can hang on to those tyres, he might as well go as far as he can and hope for a safety car. If not, hope to get a set of soft compound tyres on at the end.
Whether he goes all but one, like his mate Alex Albon did in Australia, we shall wait and see. What would you rather be running here? Max Verstappen's tyres or Charles Leclerc's tyres?
They don't really. I mean, the teams have got no knowledge, really, have they? How this race is going to unfold. They just didn't get any representative running. In fact, it was McLaren probably. Was it McLaren who did the most running on the hard compound tyres to get that knowledge? But so many problems, so many yellow flags and red flag stoppages. But 4.5 seconds now. Leclerc has done his fastest lap of the race, and indeed the fastest lap of the race, of course, as you can see, top left. But the gap up to 4.5 seconds. It seems that they're sort of playing a bit of cat and mouse with their battery pack, a bit of attack with the electrical unit, and then the next lap round the other one's faster. But whatever they're doing,
we need the car is so difficult to drive.
And in what way is it proving difficult to drive? Is it a lack of grip? Is it the porpoising? He has just done the fastest lap of the race, so if it is that difficult, then he's more talented than we think. And one of the Ferraris is coming in.
Engineers don't like messages like that because it doesn't actually give them any information.
Well, maybe it was the tyres that were causing all the issue, because Charles Leclerc is pitting. The man who started this race on pole, overtaken by Max Verstappen, coming in for a pit stop on lap 25 of this race. So the medium tyres holding up well, but a 3.2 second stop for Ferrari. They'll think that maybe they could have done a few tenths faster than that. Leclerc comes back out into this race ahead, though, of Valtteri Bottas, as he takes the long way round, and Leclerc on the inside of the pit lane exit holds on to fourth place.
Yeah, well, this was the gap I was talking about that Red Bull were building to give them the comfort zone of being able, the luxury of being able to react to Ferrari instead of having to beat them to it. So we have to assume now that Red Bull will respond immediately to cover off any undercuts.
Round of applause from the McLaren fans in the grandstand. We've seen so many different T-shirts, caps being sported by the capacity crowd here as into the hairpin. Yuki Tsunoda being pressurised by Nicholas Latifi in the Williams. And this the battle for 18th place at the moment. One of the more closer battles out on the track. Latifi and Tsunoda locked together. The Williams hasn't pitted yet. Tsunoda has. So, Verstappen, Sainz, Perez, Leclerc. Do Red Bull respond straight away to Charles Leclerc coming in? Or do they decide, well, we can leave it for a few more laps yet? As always, there's the spectre of the safety car at any street track. And if you can lock in and be on the right strategy at the right time, you can make quite a difference to your racing time. Let's go on board with Sebastian Vettel. We're down in 13th, and the driver ahead of him is his teammate Lance Stroll. Both Aston Martins starting from the pit lane after finding that their fuel was too cool and they didn't want to risk the penalty, so they had to make alterations outside of the allotted time that they need to get to the grid. Miami, first Grand Prix underwater. You can see on Sebastian Vettel's crash helmet alerting people watching around the world to the risk and the threat of rising sea levels in years to come.
Yeah, luckily the tide didn't go out in the marina at any point. Ted.
So not pitting this lap, Max Verstappen. You can understand why, Martin, as you said a bit earlier, they've got the luxury with the gap that he's built up over Charles Leclerc to wait a lap or two just to put it out. Oh no, they are coming out now. They're coming out now, and I want to see what tyre it is. As Christian Horner talking about having all those medium tyres, they're not going to use it. It's the hard tyres. They have to react, because if Charles is going to the end, then they need to give themselves the option of going to the end as well with a hard tyre. Here he comes in with a medium tyre. They need this to be good. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to be good. And it is good so far, and there's your way. Super work by Red Bull Racing there, as usual.
2.4 seconds the Red Bull was stationary for, and it's a pretty clear track at the moment as Max Verstappen makes his way out of the pit lane, and the first car that you see is his teammate Sergio Perez, but Verstappen will come out ahead of Sergio Perez. Carlos Sainz has gone on through. He, of course, has to stop again. Verstappen clear of his teammate, and he can get back into the race.
Karun just pointing out to me that Leclerc's just done a fastest middle sector of anybody for the race, so it takes a couple of laps for these hard compound tyres to fire up. Lewis too struggled to get them up to speed initially, but going nicely now in the 1 minute 33s. Unless, of course, they want to make sure they don't damage them as well. You start pushing them across the racetrack, you tear the surface of the tyre, and it literally just rips the surface of the tyre apart, doesn't it?
Valtteri Bottas has pitted as well. That's why he's now running down in 6th, with George Russell ahead of him in 5th. And there's the pit stops we've had so far. So Sainz, Perez, Russell, Ricciardo and Ocon, Stroll and Vettel and Latifi still yet to stop.
Sainz leads the Grand Prix, of course, now.
Yes.
Having not stopped.
And if he is still leading at the end of the race, he'll become the first Spanish driver not named Fernando Alonso to win a Grand Prix. But I don't think he's going to be leading for long, because out come the Ferrari pit crew. And we've seen Leclerc come in, and now we see Carlos Sainz coming in right by our commentary boxes on the pit lane entry. So what he needs is a nice straightforward stop, getting back in the race somewhere around Sergio Perez.
Perez, I think I saw a Red Bull just come past as well. Perez is in 2.
There he is. Hard tyres going on for the top 4. But look at that, 5.4 seconds. Sainz's stationary time. I said what he wanted was a nice, easy, straightforward stop, and that's not the case. Perez has come in, and it'll be a lot closer to Carlos Sainz by the time they come back out again.
Yeah, well, that engine problem cost him there, didn't it? Cost him a chance of nicking 3rd place off Carlos Sainz, but that looks like it's going to be a close race to the end.
What was the issue with Carlos Sainz? It's the wheel nut again, isn't it? Front right.
Yeah.
The temperatures are absolutely ripe for a few issues involving wheel guns, wheel nuts, and wheels not coming off in the speed that they should. We have seen this on many occasions in these sort of hot, humid conditions, oppressive conditions on this Sunday afternoon here in South Florida, where Charles Leclerc now 7.5 seconds behind the race leader, this man, Max Verstappen, and he's making those white striped hard tyres come alive in the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc.
Yeah, very fast first sector, but Max getting extremely close to the wall there, coming out of turn 16, but close doesn't matter, does it, as long as you're not in it, so that's fine.
Max Verstappen 7.5 seconds clear then of Charles Leclerc after the stops. He was 4.6 seconds clear of Leclerc before the stops. Let's give it a couple of laps whilst Verstappen's tyres warm up a little bit, see how much Leclerc can close that gap. Ted, down to you.
Well, it's got to, unfortunately for Lando Norris, Mick Schumacher and Kevin Magnussen, they believe their race is being ruined by the recovering Aston Martins of Lance Stroll and Sebastian Vettel. Do you remember Magnussen and Mick and Norris pitted quite a while ago, didn't they? Potentially on a 2-stopper, but we'll see. But they're in a DRS train. They just can't get past Stroll and Vettel, who are going long after their problems earlier on in the race. And Magnussen's race in particular, and Lando's, and Mick's for that matter, just being ruined by not being able to get past the Astons.
Yeah, 2 seconds less time in the pits for Lando Norris, Martin. He'd have been well clear of that particular scrap. He was fed out right in the middle of it and quickly became detached at the end of it.
Yeah, without doubt.
Lewis Hamilton saying the tyres already overheating. Christian Horner's with us on the Red Bull pit wall this weekend. Tyres overheating for Lewis Hamilton. You think the hard tyres that you're running with both your drivers can now go to the end?
Well, it's interesting that he's reporting that, because you know, that he's only done what 5-6 laps on them, so that would indicate more of a 2-stop, whereas the medium looked very comfortable in that first stint. So yeah, I mean, it's still not a foregone conclusion what the best strategy to the end of the race is.
Yeah, Lewis has just been told, you know, go through, get rid of some of the gauge, some of the tread, and the tyres will come back to you. So it seems as if the hards do come to you a little bit later on. But Max out front, a new fastest lap there, Christian. You've got this one covered, haven't you?
Well, you know, there's always safety cars and you know, those scenarios to go through. So that's what we're just covering at the moment. But yeah, it's all the what-if scenarios that you're trying to think about between now and the end of the race. And that includes rain, it includes safety cars. And we're managing a little bit of an issue with Checo that you heard earlier.
Well, I wanted to ask, can you fill us in with any more details as to what the problem was and how you fixed it?
He had a sensor issue, so basically you fail that sensor, you switch it onto another one, but the result of that is he's lost a little bit of power. So that's why his pace has dropped. So he's actually doing a a great job, because probably he's lost, I don't know, 20 kilowatts, and he's going quicker than Carlos.
Yeah, that's a fine effort indeed. Christian, thanks ever so much. We'll pick up the action on the racetrack with this DRS train that Ted Kravitz was talking about, headed by Fernando Alonso. Lance Stroll within DRS range, Kevin Magnussen within DRS range, Sebastian Vettel, Mick Schumacher, all within DRS range, and right at the back of it, sadly for him, Lando Norris, whose race really has been torn apart by that long stop in the pits.
I'm just calculating there that 20 kilowatts Christian's talking about is 26.82 British horsepowers. Calculating that using Google just now. So that's 25 horsepower, that's a chunk.
Here comes Kevin Magnussen. Plenty of horsepower for him in his battle with Lance Stroll, and they get very, very close to making contact. There's a view from the rear of the Aston Martin going through the Beach Club there. That looks a bit perilous. You can see right behind Magnussen the other Aston Martin of Sebastian Vettel. Yeah, through turn 12 there. That was almost a bit of a coming together, and that's what Christian Horner was talking about. Safety car can come at any moment here. Not necessarily because there's something happening at the top, but scraps going on down the field. And Magnussen under pressure here, because right behind him, Sebastian Vettel, very opportunist, says thank you very much. I'll take 13th place off you. And Mick Schumacher was almost in there to make it double trouble for K-Mag.
Yeah, Seb's done a couple of great moves today, hasn't he? As we see in the pits then, Daniel Ricciardo. And it's not been McLaren's finest weekend, has it? They just haven't had the pace on this layout with these temperatures.
Sadly not. 2.7 seconds, the stationary stop for Ricciardo, and it brings him out right with Alex Albon in the Williams, and Albon ahead of Ricciardo in 16th place. So Verstappen now 7.3 seconds clear of Charles Leclerc. Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez. It's interesting there, lap 31 for Daniel Ricciardo. So hard tyre runner from the start, making, I would imagine, it's a bit of an earlier stop than I was expecting on that hard tyre. How long can Russell go? How long can Stroll and Vettel go? Because they haven't stopped yet in this race. And Esteban Ocon too, who's currently running in 8th place by virtue of having not stopped.
Yeah, this is going to be a squabble down at the far end of the long straight to 1.2 kilometres there, just under a mile, quite a bit under a mile actually, isn't it? But look at that, a DRS train we call that.
A DRS train that Mick Schumacher would like to be heading, and right behind him, almost getting pushed round the corner, is a very good friend, Sebastian Vettel.
Well, it's almost like a paternal relationship, yes, isn't it, with Seb and Mick Schumacher.
Well, the two Hasses here really going for it. And behind Sebastian Vettel, Lando Norris is right in there as well. Now, Norris not racing where he would want to be, but would surely like to pull off a decent move to delight the crowd here. Magnussen's making that Haas as wide as he possibly can, which stops anyone trying to overtake through that slalom S's section. There's only really one line through there. Into turn 7 we go. The corner tightens all the while. Norris was right on the rear wing of Sebastian Vettel. Has had to back out a little bit on that one as Verstappen sets a new fastest lap of the race, and we can ride on board with Lando Norris now. Is he going to be able to have a go at Sebastian Vettel, or does that DRS train that you were talking about, Martin, keep the Aston ahead? And sadly, yes, it does.
Is this Mick Schumacher's, well, it's one of his best races, isn't it, so far? Is it his best? I'm not sure it's his absolute best, but it's he's right in there with Kevin Magnussen, who's in fine form, his teammate.
Best finish for Mick Schumacher, 11th in Bahrain at the start of this season. Still to score his first points, of course, in Formula One. Karun, to you.
Yeah, let's talk about George Russell for a minute, Crofty, because we haven't seen him in a while. He's running P5 on that set of tyres that he started the race with, the hard tyre, as we watch his DRS train towards turn 17. That carries on, big stalemate. He's racing Pierre Gasly, basically. That's what Mercedes told him.
We're going to get ourselves up to Stroll.
If he blocks like this, it won't work.
Well, we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, George is basically racing Pierre Gasly for bottom end of the top 10. Esteban Ocon also has to pit from 8th place. So that will be interesting because he will basically come out behind Lewis Hamilton on much fresher medium tyres towards the end of the race, where we expect the medium tyre to come into its own. So could we see a Russell versus Lewis battle towards the end of this Grand Prix?
Well, what will Mercedes do, Martin? Well, they play the team game on that one and say, we don't want any squabbling. We'll try and make maximum points. And Lewis, you've got to let your man past.
I think if George rocks up on Lewis's gearbox with the tyres on, as Karun is just explaining, I don't think it'd be too easy to defend against that.
I think that message, by the way, from Mick Schumacher, I'd rather get the feeling he'd been saying beforehand, I'd quite like to pass Kevin, I'm faster here. And what they're saying is actually, no, Kevin is doing a decent job, and we're getting quite close to Stroll, or getting closer to Stroll ahead. And you just stay within DRS range, because he's going to pull you closer to Lance Stroll, and it will all bear out in the end, maybe in your favour. At the moment, it probably feels a little bit uncomfortable for the young German driver, who's got the older German driver, and still quite young, Sebastian Vettel, right on his tail. Meanwhile, there is a race leader, and we haven't seen it for a while. There he is, Max Verstappen, going under the flyover, and he does look like he's got this race completely under control, despite Leclerc occasionally popping in with fastest lap.
Yeah, but it's a chunk faster as well. Charles Leclerc just did 4/10 faster, and he's done a great middle sector that's 3/10 up on Verstappen. So he's decided he's got to try and get up there and put a bit of pressure on the Red Bull. Can he? That's a big old gap to close.
Certainly is. Looks all rather nice for Max Verstappen, leading this race. And remember, every time he's found the checkered flag in 2022, he's gone on to win the race. Only reliability issues costing him so far. Before this race, 1,305 laps led for Max Verstappen. 16th, I think, on the all-time list for that one, and he hasn't started. He started winning a little bit more regularly in the last 2 or 3 years than the first 2 or 3 years.
And it does seem as if we were saying earlier on that Leclerc can push, do a great lap time, and then it almost looks like it's a battery recharge lap, and come back at it again. But they're yo-yoing a little bit, but it's sort of quickly becoming a 2-horse race out front now, and then not much of a squabble for third either, is it? So George, as Karun was pointing out, George Russell's the interesting one in there later on in the race. He's doing a fine job nursing those tyres. He hasn't had a pit stop yet. So who hasn't stopped? Esteban Ocon hasn't stopped, and who else we got down there?
We got Sebastian Vettel hasn't stopped, and Stroll.
Yeah, the 2 Aston Martins that started from the pit lane. So they're moving along nicely, aren't they?
Well, talking of Sebastian Vettel, we're on board with him now. Just wants a little bit more straight down that main straight. I'm just looking ahead of Sebastian Vettel. That's Kevin Magnussen. So Mick Schumacher has moved up into to 12th place, and ahead then of Kevin Magnussen. So an overtake there, be it orchestrated or not, between the 2 Haas drivers. The US Haas team have only ever had, sadly for them, Sebastian Vettel locks up, goes very wide indeed, and that allows Lando Norris to cruise by on the inside and up into 14th. The US-owned Haas team only ever had 1 top 10 finish in a United States Grand Prix. So a sign there that Sebastian Vettel's tyres might be going off a little more than we thought.
Yeah, it's when your front tyres start hurting, because you lose braking performance as well as cornering performance. But the trouble for Seb there is I think has dropped him out of that DRS train that we were talking about. And, well, that's not what I told him to do, is it, earlier in the week?
You said, watch that. Watch the inside left. Well, I think both of you did actually say you didn't rather like turn 7 very much. It was a bit too tight. A lot of cloud cover here.
There's a little bit of rain on the radar, about 8 minutes away. A little bit of rain, maybe.
And I don't think a little bit of rain is going to make a massive difference, because the asphalt, the track surface, so hot, Ted Kravitz, it's going to take quite a downpour to make any difference whatsoever.
Well, I don't know, how wet did you get in that rain shower before the race, Crofty? Or were you nice?
Stayed in the commentary box,
there
my
you
friend.
go. The rest of us were soaking. So
yeah, but you could be soaking, but you're not quite as hot as the track temperature.
Well, I'm getting there. Right, let's talk about Fernando Alonso. Just absolutely desperate. Try and get within 1 second of Pierre Gasly. Yes, the slow pit stop didn't help, but Alpine still believe that they're quicker than AlphaTauri. Nothing to show for it so far. Fernando not getting frustrated, but can't get beneath 1 second behind Gasly. So it stays Gasly 9th, Alonso, frustrated Alonso 10th. And, well, the other question I've got for you is Ricciardo. What I assume they had to pit Ricciardo when they did, because his medium tyres were going off, but all McLaren did was to drop him in the end of that DRS train containing the Hasses, his teammate Lando Norris, Sebastian Vettel and Alex Albon. And there he is, P17.
Yeah. And another race for Daniel Ricciardo, sadly for him to forget, I think.
Yeah, so George Russell is just about on the cusp of being a pit stop ahead.
Why don't we just keep going and see if there's a BSC or something over the way?
So obviously both him and the team think, oh, this is all right, let's carry on like this. But he's just about a pit stop ahead of Pierre Gasly, who's running down in 9th place at the moment, which is the race that Karun pointed out he's in. And he's right, he'll get a cheap stop if there's a virtual safety car, an actual safety car, red flag, of course, or a bit of rain.
Well, you know, he's had the benefit of safety cars go his way. George Russell this season already, his times are pretty decent, and if he's to keep up his record of being the only driver to finish in the top 5 in every race this season, that perhaps is the only strategy that's going to work out for him.
Yeah, it's a nice drive. Well, 18 cars took to the grid.
Yep.
And we've got 19 runners still, with the Astons joining from the pit lane. We've only lost Zhou Guanyu.
And that was through a technical issue. Are you surprised? First year in Baku, we didn't have anyone make crashes, did we?
No. Well, they've sort of had all their crashes through practice, really, haven't they? They've learned to respect certain bits of the racetrack. We've seen a few leery braking moments as Max smashes in a 132.3. He wants that extra World Championship point. He's 27 points behind going into this Grand Prix, behind Charles Leclerc. But, you know, if you take away Max's unreliability issues, for example, I think that would be quite a telling story in the World Championship, wouldn't it?
I think you're right. 27-point that lead. It was 40 points after the Imola sprint race for Charles Leclerc. No one, by the way, has led the championship by 40 points and failed to win it since Fernando Alonso in 2012. There is a long way to go this season, 23 races to come. There's quite a way to go in this race, and we've had 37 laps completed already. If you have missed it from the start and you're a Sky Q or a Sky Glass customer, well, press your red button. You can watch highlights of the race so far alongside the live action.
Max gave the wall there a good metre of berth. Just, you know, he's definitely taking it quite cautiously out there. And Christian Horner, though, rather nervously looking at the sky there, wasn't he?
We should actually get Christian Horner on and ask him, is it going to rain? Can you feel rain in the air? I'm sure he'd tell us on that one. Karun Chandok's at Sky Race Control. Are you monitoring team radio? Are plenty talking about the weather?
No, if I'm honest.
So it's just Christian then?
Yeah, but what is happening is that Russell is now trying to get ahead of Ocon, and there's a nice big gap for him to use those fresh tyres and try and drag himself onto the back of Lewis. So that is where he's at now. He's 22 seconds ahead of Ocon. He needs another 2 seconds to be clear of him.
Yeah, just to be on the safe side as well. But, I mean, would you come in last lap? Let's have a little look here. Sergio Perez, who we know has got an issue and is losing, what did you say, Martin?
26.82 British horsepower.
British horsepower after a failed sensor early on. Well, the last couple of laps, he's taken about 4/10 out of Sergio Perez. Perez is going along nicely in 4th, and he is lapping slower than Bottas and Hamilton. But he's right, a safety car in the next 10 laps or so would put him right in the hunt.
Furious blue flag waving there. Got some American marshals, we've got some Brits.
There's some furious action there. Fernando Alonso and Pierre Gasly. And they've made contact, and I wonder if Gasly's got a little bit of damage. because he's going to lose another place here. It's Lance Stroll who moves up into the points. The Aston Martin hasn't pitted yet. There was an opportune move going on between Alonso and Gasly has very much come off worse.
And not the first contact in this race that Fernando's had, but they make those Alpines strong with the looks of it.
They need to. Into turn one, we went Fernando Alonso on the inside, locks up, couldn't really stop himself.
I think he closed the door in the last minute.
Also known as turning into the corner.
Yeah, he was ahead, and it wasn't Fernando's corner, and Fernando did lock up. The stewards have noted that. Doesn't mean they're necessarily investigating it, but that has certainly cost Pierre Gasly. Alonso up then into 9th place eventually, but Gasly dropping his way now down into 11th. Charles Leclerc setting another fastest lap, but he's still a long way behind the race leader. This has been very much Red Bull's day so far.
Yeah, I think Max is just pacing it as well. Obviously, the long pit stop really damaged Ferrari's ability to put pressure on Red Bull, although it looks like Red Bull had it covered up until now anyway in terms of raw pace. But once again, we're seeing these two in a league of their own out front, just like we saw with Max and Lewis last year, as we've seen over the decades as well. They're 17 seconds clear now of Leclerc, 17 seconds clear of Sainz and Perez. So 25 horsepower, in my reckoning, that's about 4/10 of a second. As Will.i.am looks on there, that's about 4/10 of a second that Perez is losing in horsepower per lap.
Which is crumbs of comfort, I'm sure, for Carlos Sainz, who is another having a pretty lonely race this afternoon. A long way behind his teammate, a long way clear of Sergio Perez in 3rd place. And oh dear, Lando Norris has made contact with the AlphaTauri of Pierre Gasly. Sebastian Vettel slows down to avoid any further issues. And you know how things can change in a street race very quickly. We have a virtual safety car. Lando Norris is out of this race, and in the blink of an eye, suddenly things might just get more dramatic.
Yeah, this works into George Russell's hands a treat, but also I think we saw Gasly in the background going quite slowly actually just before that contact. So Aston Martin too plays beautifully into their hands. Anybody who's yet to stop will take advantage. So 16 seconds lost under the virtual safety car instead of well over 20 in a normal environment where your rivals are flat out.
So Russell, who was hanging out for a virtual safety car or a safety car, does make his stop. Esteban Ocon will be coming into the pits too. Lando Norris is out of the McLaren and walking away. And interestingly, the virtual safety car thrown and covered under double waved yellows and VSC, where the drivers all reduce their speed by about 40% and the race is neutralised, rather than bringing out Bernd Maylander and the safety car itself.
So Gasly had gone wide through there, then wide again. So this is why I thought I saw a slow car in the background. In fact, he has backed off, hasn't he? And somehow he's not realised that Lando's coming through. And the tyre comes off like a polo mint. Luckily stays within the confines of the racetrack.
Safety car deployed. They
have to.
Yeah, Bernd Maylander will be coming out in the safety car. It is a blind corner, isn't it? And the drivers have been talking about visibility, Martin, all weekend. Gasly just not see Lando coming on the inside.
No, Gasly's a little bit wide through 8 as well. His tyres will be quite dirty because he's had quite an adventure for 3 corners there, hasn't he? And he just didn't seem to know he was there. If he did, he didn't leave him enough space.
I'm out, boys. Yes, mate. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
First DNF of the season for Lando Norris. Ted Kravitz, down to you.
Checo's pitting, and Mercedes are also getting ready, must be for Lewis Hamilton, and it's the soft tyres. Ooh la la, the soft tyres for Lewis Hamilton. It's not going to be George Russell, surely, because he's put in a new set of mediums. But yeah, they couldn't double pit the Aston Martins, and now Ocon has stayed out as well on that first one. Surely Ocon will pit now.
That's interesting. Checo getting out just ahead of the Alfa Romeo of Valtteri Bottas. That was pretty tight. So we see Verstappen leading from Leclerc, Sainz, Perez, Bottas, Hamilton and Russell, currently 7th. Esteban Ocon having to make his pit stop too, and he's in the pits now. Soft tyres going on for Ocon.
That leaves Sergio Perez in a great place there, doesn't it, on fresh tyres? He will catch the pack up largely. He'll have Nicholas Latifi between him and the leaders, but Latifi is lapped, so he'll be allowed to unlap, presumably, under the safety a little bit later on. They're clearing the car quite quickly there. So suddenly, Sergio Perez right back in the game with that.
And will that negate, I wonder, the loss in power that he's been having and the disadvantage he's had from that? Sebastian Vettel makes his pit stop. Ricciardo stops again. He goes onto the soft compound tyres. A bit of debris on the track that needs moving away after that incident between Pierre Gasly and Lando Norris, whose 15-race finishing streak, and I think that's the equal longest active streak at the moment, has come to an end.
Alonso gets a 5-second penalty for that contact down into turn 1 with Gasly, which I think is fair enough.
Okay, Max and both Ferraris have stayed out. Max and both Ferraris have stayed out. The Ferraris are on old hards. The race is on.
Yeah, it definitely is. That's played beautifully into Sergio Perez's hands. They'll close the pack up, the back markers will get out of the way, and he's sitting there on fresh mediums instead of used hard compound tyres that are very difficult to fire up. Others going on to the soft compound, as we're seeing there on the AlphaTauri. So this has really mixed it up.
Certainly has. Ted Cram, it's down to you.
That's twice that Mercedes have come out into the pit box with scrubbed soft tyres with the red sidewalls, changed their mind, and then gone back in. I think they think that Hamilton was too late now. Hamilton's got...
Well, I didn't quite understand why they were there, because the safety car has bunched everybody up here. Maybe, Ted, they were playing to those paying a lot of money in Garage 6.
We have one more chance to pit if you think you want to do it.
You tell me, man. Don't leave it to me. Do you think I can? I don't want to lose a position.
Okay, recommend staying out. So staying out.
I will lose this position to George for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but then on soft tyres would have surely retaken it.
Yeah, maybe they weren't playing to those who've paid their money to stay in Garage 6. There is a gap down to Alonso and Esteban Ocon, but you know, George Russell on 2-lap-old medium tyres. Lewis is going to struggle to get past him. Why concede the track position?
He's going to struggle to stay ahead of him, but it would now bring him out, behind Mick Schumacher, I think, for example, if they pit Lewis and Ocon and who else? Yeah, Alonso too. It would give Lewis Hamilton a lot of overtaking to do. They pit him now that the crocodile has closed up behind the safety car.
So we have had Tsunoda, Gasly and Ricciardo, Magnussen and Perez stopping for a second time behind the virtual safety car and the safety car itself. We've got Fernando Alonso given a 5-second time penalty. That'll be added on to his race time at the end for causing the collision with Pierre Gasly that eventually led to the collision between Gasly and Lando Norris that has taken Lando Norris, sadly for him and for McLaren fans, out of this race. There's Bernd Mailander, the safety car driver, going as fast as he possibly can while still remaining safe and allowing the marshals, there they are, to clean up the debris on the track. And there are quite a few bits of debris that still need sweeping up.
And this is the good thing, obviously, about the full safety cars. It puts the pack in a known place as Lando, with that rather dramatic crash helmet design, walks back to the pits. It does give the marshals some clear track and some knowledge of when the pack will arrive. And sometimes we hear them moaning about the pace of the safety car. Well, Bernd Mailander is told sometimes to back the pack up, to buy the marshals some time to clear the track and clear the car or the debris.
That extra set of medium tyres for Checo Perez coming in very handy indeed. It's given him some fresh boots to put on to see if that makes a difference when we get the race restarted after having that issue because of the failed sensor and power unit, losing about 26 brake horsepower, 3 or 4 tenths of a second per lap. as a result of a technical issue that he could do not much about.
Interesting, there's no fenders on those boats.
The fake marina that has been the talk of Miami before the race, and finally the race has given us something to talk about this afternoon. Christian Horner, talk to us about strategy decisions. Who made the call to come in? Was that the pit wall or was that Checo?
That was a pit wall, but we got lucky with that because Max had crossed the pit line whilst it was still a VSC, and then your worst nightmare is it went full safety car, which would have given Leclerc and Sainz a free stop, and thankfully they missed it with both of their cars, so we're effectively still on the same strategy. Otherwise they would have had a significant advantage.
Yeah, but Sergio now, is he still missing this 20 kilowatts of power? Because he's sitting pretty there now, isn't he?
He is, but that medium tyre will give him, you know, an advantage in grip to the Ferraris. So he was doing a great job in managing that power delta. So, you know, hopefully with the slippy car we've got on the straight line, we still might be able to have a crack at the Ferraris and be able to defend against Russell, obviously, who might be coming through quite quickly on the medium as well.
And can I read into that, then he won't be having a crack at Max out front if he has got a lot more pace?
Depends what the pace is. You know, our target is we've got to score as many points against Ferrari at the moment, but you know, he's managing an issue at the moment, so that's the first thing. That tyre's giving the best chance of holding on to his position and even attacking the cars ahead. But as I said, we were let off the hook with Ferrari just through timing.
Christian Escaro, do you think it's just timing or also the fact that you guys kept an extra set of the new mediums, whereas Ferrari didn't? So that they wouldn't have had that option that you had with Checo.
They could have put a soft on.
Fair enough.
You know, and they had a free stop. So yeah, you know, that's the frustrating thing. You just don't know when it's going from a virtual to a full, and that's your risk at the front of the field. So yeah, you know, thankfully it was all neutralised.
Thanks, Christian. We'll let you get off because the lapped cars can now overtake the safety car, and those that have been lapped, Gasly, Latifi and Tsunoda, can make their way out of harm's way and out of those that are going to be battling 4 points when we restart. It's only going to be a couple of laps, surely, before we can get the race going again. This is Pierre Gasly going off the track.
Getting into the fringe of the rubbish that collect on the outside of the track.
I have a problem, car doesn't turn.
Sounded like it was on the radio when he went off, doesn't it?
I think he was in the initial part, and he certainly wasn't looking in his left-hand mirror to see what was coming behind him. I don't think he realised Norris was there at all, and was a little bit caught blind.
It was almost the oops. Was that on the radio when the impact happened, or when he went off? We don't know exactly when that, of course, was played out on delay. But yeah, you can hear some tyre squeal and an oops in there.
Yeah.
And it's almost certain, I would say, the impact point.
Ted Kravitz, down to you.
So I'm just wondering who this is going to advantage and who we should look out for on the restart. The answer, number one, is Esteban Ocon, as well as Sergio Perez, we've already been talking about. Esteban and George Russell, of course. So apart from Sergio Perez, George Russell, it's Esteban Ocon on the soft tyre. It's going to be right behind Mick Schumacher. It's horrible for Mick, because poor Mick's having his best race ever in Formula One and might score his first points ever in Formula One after a season and a bit. And, well, maybe he might end up with one, Mick, but surely Ocon is going to be moving further up. And, yeah, poor Lando Norris, but it is quite a long way to get back to the paddock. But, hey, well, if he's bored, he could just take that basketball he's wearing on his head and bounce it around a bit. You know, try a three-pointer somewhere.
I think he's made his way back. Yes, thank you, Ted. Safety car in this lap, Martin.
Yeah, there's such a mixture of tyres out there now. Old, hard compound tyres on the 3 leaders, some with fresh mediums, many then with fresh softs. We're looking at Magnussen, Ricciardo, Tsunoda, Gasly, Sergio Perez, we know, on the medium. So a right old mixture there as they restart.
Sky Q, Sky Glass customers, press your red button and you can watch highlights alongside the live action, which is going to get going in about half a lap's time. Hard compound tyres on Verstappen, Leclerc, Sainz, Bottas and Hamilton. Also Alonso and Schumacher, but in between, Perez on the mediums, Russell on the mediums, Ocon on the soft. You've got to watch Esteban Ocon, I think, right at the start here. He, starting from the back of the grid today, has made his way up into 10th place. Will really fancy his chances to move up even further, I'm sure. George Russell will be right on the tail of his teammate Lewis Hamilton. What do Mercedes do at the start here? Because if they tell them the two Mercedes drivers just take it easy, they could open themselves up to attacks from behind. And is this the best chance that Charles Leclerc has had for a while? Absolutely, of getting past Max Verstappen as Pierre Gasly pits, and I would imagine pitting to retire from this race after the contact with Lando Norris that brought out the safety car.
Yeah, it was his second contact as well, wasn't it? After Fernando Alonso was in the side of him into turn 1, and then there were 17, and they're all in a line.
Because Max Verstappen has just slowed it down a bit to let Bernd Maylander and the safety car get underway and get out of the way. And when does Verstappen get underway? How long does he want to hold the pack up? Because, well, if he goes now, then he risks Leclerc getting a slipstream down this straight and the next one.
Yeah, but it's such a short straight, isn't it, into the pit straight? So you're gonna want to go quite late, really, but nail it off this hairpin, knowing that you've got to just spot. There he goes. You can see it wag its tail. It's gone.
Perez already on the tail of Carlos Sainz here. He got much better traction out of that hairpin as we go racing here in Miami once again. And out in front is Verstappen from Leclerc, behind Carlos Sainz defending against Sergio Perez. Valtteri Bottas right behind these two, waiting to pick up the scraps. Behind Bottas comes Hamilton and then Russell. Behind Russell, Alonso, Schumacher and Ocon in 10th. But Verstappen leads them away, and he did get the jump on Charles Leclerc, and already there's a yellow flag as someone goes off in the first part of the sector. Quickly back onto the track again. We're watching Sergio Perez chasing after Carlos Sainz. Now, can he get good traction and good speed down this straight to try and put a move on the Ferrari by the time we get to turn 11? Sainz looks like he's got just far enough out of the way, but Perez is coming back at him.
Indeed he is. So you've got to spot your braking points, get your brakes right up to temperature, tyres too. You can't be too brave on them. You can't leave any time on the table either. George Russell right on the back of Lewis Hamilton there on the much, much better tyre.
Hey, bravo, Mick Schumacher. What a move that was there in 9th place at the moment. Mick Schumacher having a real good time of it and is ahead of Ocon and is ahead then of the Williams of Alex Albon, and he just had to get his muscles out and his elbows out a little bit going into turn 11. There was a collision between Magnussen and Stroll at turn 2. That's why we saw the yellow flag. Stewards have noted that as we get towards the end of this opening lap after the safety car, and it's as you were in the top 3. Verstappen, Leclerc, Sainz, and then Perez coming back at Sainz again on those medium tyres. Is this straight long enough for Perez? Has he got enough power, even with the issues he's been facing this afternoon? No, not quite.
No, so we'll wait for the DRS to be enabled at the end of this lap. We know the Red Bull is mighty fast in a straight line. He is carrying a bit of an engine issue, Christian Horner's told us about, but if he gets anywhere near the back of that Ferrari, it's going to be very difficult for Carlos Sainz to defend that. At the moment, Russell still behind Hamilton.
And Lewis Hamilton right behind Valtteri Bottas as well.
Pair. Look at this pair.
Well, there's not much to separate them. We've already seen one change of the lead so far today. Verstappen getting past Leclerc. Can Leclerc make it another swap around and retake the lead after starting on pole? Not on this particular occasion. He's just that little bit too far back.
Quite a lot of porpoising from the Red Bull there. We don't see so much of that. But obviously they're getting to much lower fuel now with 10 laps to go, including this one. But we did see Leclerc able to push hard, didn't we, through various phases of this Grand Prix. But he was just being edged out by Verstappen all through. Let's see, he still fancies a run, doesn't he? But he's lost 3/10 in the middle sector. Charles Leclerc doesn't get DRS this lap.
No, DRS will come in on the next lap. Let's look a little bit further behind Sergio Perez to Valtteri Bottas. Bottas has Lewis Hamilton right behind him, and Lewis Hamilton has George Russell, his teammate, right behind him as well.
Sainz gone wide.
Sainz gone wide. Perez tried to get past him. Sainz slammed the door. Bottas stayed ahead of Hamilton, who just stayed ahead of Russell too, and we can pick up our race leader, Max Verstappen, ahead of Charles Leclerc, as Sergio Perez coming back then at Carlos Sainz and running out of straight once more.
DRS will now be enabled. Leclerc at the moment is within striking range. He's 8/10 behind. We know he's good through the first sector in that Ferrari, and this is a key lap if he wants to have a run at Max Verstappen.
Driver of the day vote closes in 7 laps. I dare say what happens in the next 6 laps might just dictate where your vote is going to go today. And we're on board with Sergio Perez. Started 4th, hasn't changed places. Would dearly love, I'm sure, to add to his 17 podiums in Formula One. The man who's finished runner-up in the last 2 races would love to be back on the podium for the 3rd race running, and he's got that DRS and he's got that pace advantage, and he's not quite got the roads to try and get past the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. You can see a few smoke bombs being let off by the Ferrari fans here, and that's blowing over the track, which won't make it easy for our drivers either. And look at the 2 Mercedes.
Yeah, Russell climbing all over the back of Lewis Hamilton there, and he'll have DRS down this straight as well. Hamilton getting a little bit of slide at the back coming out of that turn 16. And what's going to happen? Will Russell lunge down into the braking point?
Well, Hamilton should get DRS as well. He's making a move to try and break the toe of George Russell. Russell wants to go the long way round here at the outside of the hairpin. This is a great battle between the 2 Mercedes drivers, and Valtteri Bottas has gone wide. That's allowed Lewis Hamilton to slip through and up into 5th place, and George Russell follows him and up into 6th.
Look how close then Leclerc is again, within 0.4 of a second, a new fastest lap of the race. He has been completely energised by that safety car.
It's given him a chance that he thought had gone and passed him after Max Verstappen had passed him in the early part of the race. Half a second between Verstappen and Leclerc, just a few car lengths. Same half a second between Sainz and Perez, 3rd and 4th, and the same half a second between Hamilton and Russell, the 2 Mercedes drivers, in 5th and 6th.
You don't know where to look for the next race. It's going on all through the remaining 17 runners, but Leclerc then really beginning to smell victory here, isn't he?
Leclerc almost squeezing past down into turn 11, and now it swoops round turns 12 and 13, rises up over the crest. He's going to get DRS once again. Don't want to take too much curb. You'll be into the concrete through that particular part of the track. Sergio Perez now going through it in hot pursuit of Carlos Sainz. It's Red Bull being chased by Ferrari. It's Ferrari being chased by Red Bull. As down the back straight we go. Verstappen's looking in his mirrors, and Leclerc is just a little bit too far back. He's getting a much better exit out of the final turn, but has George Russell got ahead of Lewis Hamilton back in 5th place? Yes, he has. George Russell now ahead of Hamilton. Hamilton under pressure from Valtteri Bottas. Bottas under pressure from Fernando Alonso. Mick Schumacher under pressure from Esteban Ocon, and this is why the 2 Mercedes got past the Alpha. Bottas going wide and hitting the concrete.
Yeah, almost into the wall there, wasn't he? But Leclerc had another bit of dose of DRS down the pit straight, but it didn't get the job done. And there was the move then. And Lewis really, that's off the road. He had to yield it. George had to yield it. But did he?
But did he yield it? And then did he repass after yielding?
Yeah.
They might take a look at that, but
yeah, they will. They'll take a look at that.
I'd be amazed if Mercedes protest it. That's not going to be Rob Meadows on the pit wall going, I think you're fine, we need to sort that out. Not really.
Look at Leclerc's got his head down, hasn't he? Really going for it.
He's got his head down. Stewards have had their head down looking at the incident between Magnussen and Stroll on the restart. No further investigation necessary. 14th and 15th they're scrapping for at the moment. Sebastian Vettel is right on the tail of Esteban Ocon as Aston Martin try and get points. And it's not out of the equation that he could muscle his way past, because he's gaining on the Alpine as it stands currently. 5 laps until your driver of the day vote closes. Well, let's see what happens here as Sergio Perez chases Carlos Sainz out in front. Max Verstappen's got a nice buffer into this hairpin, but it's the Ferrari that gets much better traction out of this corner.
But this Red Bull straight line speed paying dividends again, isn't it? It's such a tool they've got available to them to defend and to attack during Grand Prix.
Perez is close and getting closer and has got DRS and is going to go for it down the inside into turn 1, but he's outbraked himself. They made the briefest of contacts possibly, but Sainz had the awareness just to move to the left, allow Perez to go through. He locked up his brakes. Sainz said thank you very much, and that's the first attack from Sergio Perez survived for the Ferrari.
Yeah, Sergio put a little bit of lateral movement into the steering wheel there and just loosened off the front tyres. You've got to do that in an absolute straight line. And you can just see then, as soon as he has to turn away from the Ferrari, he loosened that right front. And it was a lunge. It was a late one, but it nearly got away with. Look at these two.
We have seen some pretty decent scraps so far this season between Charles Leclerc, the championship leader, and Max Verstappen.
A lot of curb there again for Leclerc. Got away with that one.
The defending champion, but they're giving us another treat in these closing stages here in Miami. He is closer, but is he close enough? And he'd probably like a little bit more DRS down this straight. Finally, the gap opens in that rear wing, and round about 12 miles an hour worth of extra speed comes Charles Leclerc's way, and he's a lot closer now coming out of this particular corner and onwards towards the final straight, or the main straight I should say. Here goes Max Verstappen, but I see Leclerc not quite close enough, not in the way that Perez was on the last lap behind Carlos Sainz.
And they're giving Max Verstappen a higher engine mode to battery deployment to try to fend off the Ferrari here, as Leclerc just pushes for all he's worth. But Max Verstappen, despite his tender age, has got a wise old head on him in Formula One these days, and he will not be easily flustered.
Saturday's not big fan to me, really.
Copy, Lewis, another safety car.
And to be fair, it is another safety car, and that's what's given George Russell the option. But Russell was calling it himself, saying, no, look, stay out. We'll hang out for a safety car, for a virtual safety car. And that's what he got after the disappointment in qualifying yesterday. Russell's on for another top 5 finish here to extend his record of top 5 finishes in every race this season. Behind all of this, Mick Schumacher still in the points, still running 9th and on for his first points in Formula One. Esteban Ocon's doing all he can to try and get into 9th place, and Sebastian Vettel is right behind in the Aston Martin as his teammate Lance Stroll gets ahead of Kevin Magnussen down in 14th, and Charles Leclerc comes back at Max Verstappen once again, but he hasn't got the DRS on this lap. Verstappen looks like he might have survived the 3 or 4 lap challenges from the Ferrari, and it might be a bit more comfortable from here on in.
Catch me if you can, and he can't at the moment. And at Perez, very, very close to Sainz, but not alongside him as they head into the pit straight.
You don't always need overtaking to get exciting. Obviously, we quite like to see some overtaking from time to time, but the fact that these cars can run so much closer than in previous seasons for that much longer is giving us some pretty epic duels. And you have to say, Martin, Verstappen and Leclerc are putting on the entertainment in style this season.
Oh, they have, but they've already pulled 6 seconds out, but George Russell has let Lewis Hamilton back past. Was it? We've got a yellow flag out there as well. Was it because of he didn't fully yield that position when he kind of half passed off the track, let him through, and then carried on? So I wonder if that's what's going on there. He'll have another game now, I would imagine.
And down at turn 1, Sebastian Vettel's had a spin and he's lost places. And that's rather ruined his particular afternoon. That's why he's down in 16th. George Russell is having a go at Lewis Hamilton into turn 11 as we watch the Ferraris and the Red Bull scrapping away. Behind them, there comes Sainz and Perez. And I was going to say in a moment, we'll see George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. Here's Sebastian Vettel. Why did he spin? Well, he was going for the move there on the Haas of Mick Schumacher. He managed to get his way through. Schumacher came back at him down the inside, and that is why Sebastian Vettel spun and Mick Schumacher hitting him.
Which gap was that? I didn't see that. And that's it, I guess.
That parental relationship you were talking about, Martin.
Yeah.
I mean, that's clearly my corner.
That's just ended in heartbreak for both of them.
You can't be mates as Formula One drivers, you just can't.
And Mick Schumacher on the verge of his first points in Formula One. They have gone. He's down in 15th. That's the end of his race as well. that's a parental relationship. Well, I think Mick Schumacher's heading for the naughty boy step in Sebastian Vettel's mind on that particular corner. George Russell is back ahead of Lewis Hamilton. Said before we saw those replays that he was going for it. He did go for it, and he has got past and up into 5th. And Verstappen now 1.2 seconds, as you can see, clear of Leclerc.
Yeah, and George, it's a pity because George Russell was beginning to catch Perez, but I think he, for safety, gave that position back and then did it just before a DRS zone and breezed straight back past his illustrious teammate Lewis Hamilton.
Heart does go out a little bit to Mick Schumacher. I mean, the opportunity was there. Sebastian Vettel had slipped by on the entry into the hairpin, and it was a move that just carried on with the Alpine of Esteban Ocon in the way. But it's ended in heartbreak for Vettel, heartbreak for Schumacher, a delight, I'm sure, for Alex Albon, who's put himself up into 10th place and is about to score his 2nd points of the season. And the stewards are going to look at that incident involving that man there, Sebastian Vettel, and Mick Schumacher, for causing a collision. And the Aston Martin is, it's had one of those days where it started badly and it's ended even worse for Sebastian Vettel. Meanwhile, let's show you what happened with George Russell and Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, in the DRS, Lewis covers the inside. George says, well, I'll just go around the outside instead, then throws the anchor out, gets it slowed up nicely, slowed down nicely for the apex. You go a long way around that wall, and that then is all that was needed to put Russell back into 5th, but it's dropped him 8 seconds behind Sergio Perez.
I'm sure he'll be delighted with 5th place, though, given that after a disappointing qualifying, Russell started 12th in this race and wasn't hugely hopeful of a decent afternoon, but a decent afternoon it has been. Ted, down to you.
Yeah, so just looking down towards the Williams pit wall, I'm sure they're not showing it, they're all just sitting there, but they must be delighted knowing that it's 1 point at the moment for Alex Albon, but with Alonso's penalty, Crofty, that's probably going to be 2 if they can hold on. If they can hold on to this, they're within 5 seconds just. Or has he managed to extend it, Alonso?
At the end of the last lap, they were 4/10 off.
Okay. So that's going to be tough, isn't it? Alonso's going to be going great guns to try to only drop down 1 place behind his teammate Esteban Ocon. Oh, we got a yellow flag?
A very brief yellow flag. Track is clear once again.
So it must be the lucky red hair rinse that's worked for Alex Albon this weekend.
Yes, we'll talk more about that in the notebook after this race this evening. Max Verstappen is on his final lap of this race. He won his first season of car racing. It was the Florida winter season in the series in 2014. He won at Homestead, won at Palm Beach. Well, 8 years later, he's going to be winning at Miami here.
Leclerc gave him a run for his money, but you have to say Red Bull had it covered. They gave him a bit more deployment towards the end. So I think, as I said, he was not going to get flustered in a hurry. Full respect to them. They put on a good show out front. To once again, Red Bull with that straight line speed advantage, really making it count. And 3rd best team, Mercedes-Benz, coming home in 5th and 6th. That's a good recovery from them this weekend.
Is. There are signs that there might be a bit more to play for the Constructors' Champions as we head to Spain and then Monaco for the next few races, but the signs that we've seen right from the start that it could be a decent scrap between Verstappen and Leclerc for the rest of this season have very much carried on here in Miami. Max Verstappen started 3rd on the grid. It's the 4th time in his career he started 3rd on the grid. He is going to turn that into victory after passing Leclerc on the road to take the lead. He has held on to that lead, and Max Verstappen wins in Miami to come home first once again and extend the run that whenever he sees the checkered flag this season, he goes on to take victory. Charles Leclerc, for the first time in his career, will stand on the podium in the United States. Carlos Sainz makes it a 2-3 for Ferrari. Sergio Perez shares the spoils in the top 4. It's Red Bull and Ferrari once again that take the top 4 positions. And it'll be George Russell, Lewis Hamilton coming home to take 5th and 6th for Mercedes. Verstappen, though, your winner in Miami this afternoon.
Sainz did a good job, didn't he, hanging on to 3rd there against Perez on those tyres. Perez, of course, we know with that engine issue, but that was a good race in the end, wasn't it?
Safety
steady in the middle.
Livened it up at the end.
And the race win, Max. What a recovery. Fantastic. P1.
Yes! Oh, what a race, mates. That was nice. Tough one, but really good.
Well done, mate. You really made that work. The pass and those last laps behind after the safety car came in. Well done for hanging on with there. So, yeah, and you got fastest lap. Well done.
Yeah, awesome job, guys. Good recovery for the start of the weekend, so we can be really proud of that.
Well, the recovery after a pretty wretched Friday for Max Verstappen. Qualifying, pole could have been his, but he made the mistake and had to settle for third.
He was pretty miffed, wasn't he? Max, unusually for him, he's normally, I want to be with this team forever and ever, and I know he means that, but he was pretty fed up with the reliability issues on Friday.
It was a bit of a caged tiger pouncing around, or prowling around, I should say, in the paddock yesterday and today, but the caged tiger very much came out and showed his stripes on the track. 17% of the votes getting driver of the day, which shows there were quite a few out there that the fans were enjoying. And I'm just looking now, Charles Leclerc would have attracted plenty of the vote, I'm sure. He and Carlos Sainz putting in a decent shift for Ferrari, who lead the way at the top of the Constructors' Championships. This is Kevin Magnussen and Lance Stroll. That's the stewards were having a little look at this, and I think they're going to...
K-Mag's already under investigation for weaving on the straight, moving left and right on the straight, or indeed right and left, depending which straight.
Yeah, cool. I think the stewards are going to look at that after the race. Let's just fill you in with the rest of the classification. We said that Russell and Hamilton 5th and 6th, Bottas 7th, Ocon managed to come home in 8th place. It's a fine drive by Esteban Ocon today. Ahead of it, behind him, Fernando Alonso.
And that's P5. Great drive today.
Oh my, nice recovery again. Sorry for yesterday, but points were rewarded today, and we got some good ones. Nice work.
And behind Fernando Alonso, Alex Albon, but not by much, Martin Brundle.
No, I mean, Albon did his personal best in the Grand Prix. Alonso carrying the 5-second penalty with a lunge into turn 1 on Gasly, and he finishes 2/10 ahead of Alex Albon, who continues to drive very nicely indeed for Williams this season.
You might just want to watch out for Ted's notebook a little later on, and Simon and Jensen and Danica in the paddock, because the stewards might also look at Fernando Alonso for leaving the track and gaining an advantage. They've noted that might have taken place, and if it does, that could be a second penalty for Fernando.